Have you ever felt like you're stuck in an endless season of waiting, praying for a breakthrough that never seems to come? You're not alone. Life often feels like an unanswered prayer, a test of patience that stretches faith to its limits. But what if that waiting period isn't a punishment, but a preparation? What if God is doing more behind the scenes than you can imagine? Psalm 40 isn't just another passage in the Bible, it's a powerful blueprint for those who feel lost in life's delays. It teaches that waiting isn't wasted, that faith grows in silence, and that those who trust in God will eventually stand on solid ground. It's a message of patience, transformation, and the promise that no suffering is in vain. Most people give up too soon. They pray, they hope, they wait. But when answers don't come on their timeline, doubt creeps in. What if the difference between struggle and breakthrough is understanding how to wait? Psalm 40 reveals that waiting isn't passive, it's active. It's about preparing for what's coming, not just longing for an escape. And when the wait is over, God turns the pain into praise. If you've ever questioned God's timing, if you've ever felt abandoned in the silence, this message is for you. There's a deeper purpose in the process, and Psalm 40 holds the key. But before we unlock it, ask yourself this. Are you ready to see waiting in a whole new light? Waiting is one of the hardest spiritual tests. It's easy to trust when answers come fast, but what about when silence stretches endlessly? That's when doubt creeps in, whispering that maybe God isn't listening. The Bible is filled with stories of those who waited: Abraham for a son, Joseph for freedom, David for the throne. Each of them faced the same battle. Would they hold on to faith or give in to despair? The real test isn't just about time. It's about trust. There's something profoundly human about impatience. When a person prays for healing, a breakthrough or guidance, the mind races, searching for signs. But faith isn't about seeing immediate results. It's about believing even when there's nothing to see. Angels, unseen but present, remind believers that delays aren't denials. Like a farmer waiting for the harvest, patience isn't passive. It's an expectation that what is planted will grow even when the soil looks barren. Think about waiting in traffic. Some fume with frustration, others turn up the music and enjoy the ride. The difference? Perspective. When people understand that God's timing is perfect, the waiting shifts from suffering to preparation. The Bible teaches that every delay refines character. A diamond isn't formed overnight. It requires pressure, heat, and time. Likewise, spiritual growth happens in seasons of waiting, where unseen changes shape a person's future. And what about prayer during the wait? It's tempting to stop praying when nothing changes, but that's when prayer matters most. Imagine a runner training for a marathon. They don't quit because they don't see immediate results. They push through, knowing strength is being built with every step. Praying isn't about convincing God to move faster, it's about strengthening trust. Those who persist in prayer are like spiritual athletes, conditioning their souls for greater endurance. One of the greatest mistakes is mistaking silence for absence. Just because God isn't speaking doesn't mean He isn't working. A construction site looks chaotic before the masterpiece is finished. Sometimes believers feel abandoned, not realizing that every unanswered prayer is laying bricks for something greater. The Bible reveals that even Jesus waited 30 years before beginning His ministry. If He had to wait, how much more should believers embrace the process? Waiting, at its core, is an invitation to faith. It's an opportunity to lean into God instead of running from Him. Like an artist, adding layer upon layer to a masterpiece, every moment of waiting adds depth, wisdom, and strength to a person's soul. But here's the real question. What if waiting isn't just about getting what was prayed for, but about becoming who God intended? And that brings us to something even more powerful. Waiting isn't just about patience, it's about expectation. Psalm 40 describes a wait filled with faith, not frustration. The psalmist isn't just sitting still, he's actively trusting. That's the difference between passive waiting and active hope. Passive waiting is like standing in line, watching the clock. Active hope is like preparing for rain before a single cloud appears. It's living as if the answer is already on the way. Faith-filled waiting looks like Noah building the ark before seeing a drop of rain. It's like a farmer tilling the ground before any sign of a harvest. The Bible repeatedly shows that miracles happen when people move in faith, not just when they see results. Angels are assigned to those who walk in faith, not fear. True belief means acting today as if the promise is already fulfilled. That's the kind of hope that moves mountains. A person waiting for a breakthrough should ask, "Am I living as if it's already coming?" If someone is praying for a new job but refuses to apply anywhere, is that faith? If they're believing for healing but speaking only defeat, are they truly expecting a miracle? The Bible makes it clear. Faith without action is dead. True hope isn't just a feeling. It's a force that shapes choices, words, and attitudes. This kind of hope is contagious. Ever notice how being around a joyful person lifts the mood? Hope works the same way. The psalmist's hope in Psalm 40 wasn't just for himself, it inspired others. That's why testimonies matter. When someone shares how prayer changed their life, it strengthens the faith of those still waiting. Hope isn't just personal, it's a light that leads others out of darkness. But what happens when hope starts to fade? Even the strongest believers can grow weary. That's why it's crucial to feed the spirit. Just like the body needs food, faith needs nourishment. The Bible, prayer, and worship aren't just spiritual practices, they're fuel. Skipping them is like trying to drive a car on an empty tank. Those who stay connected to God will find their hope renewed daily. Hope isn't about ignoring reality, it's about knowing that reality can change. It's standing on God's promises even when circumstances say otherwise. Angels are working behind the scenes even when the evidence isn't visible yet. The key is persistence. Those who keep believing, keep praying, and keep expecting will see the results. And when that hope finally turns into reality, something incredible happens next. There's a moment in every believer's life when God seems distant. Prayers feel like they bounce off the ceiling and silence becomes deafening. Psalm 40 reminds us that even when it feels like no one is listening, God hears every cry. The psalmist describes being lifted from the pit, proof that God was there all along. It's not about if he's present, it's about trusting him even when his presence isn't obvious. Think of a parent teaching a child to walk. At first, they hold the child's hands, steadying every step, but eventually, they step back, not to abandon, but to strengthen. The child may feel alone, but the parent's eyes never leave them. God works the same way. Sometimes he steps back, not to disappear, but to build trust. Angels surround those who believe, even when they don't feel it. Faith is knowing he's near, even in the silence. Many struggle with doubt when they can't sense God's presence. That's why the Bible constantly reminds us to walk by faith, not by sight. If feelings were the measure of truth, faith wouldn't be needed. A cloudy sky doesn't mean the sun has vanished. It's still there, shining beyond the clouds. Likewise, God's presence never leaves, even when emotions say otherwise. The key is believing beyond what's visible. One of the biggest traps in times of waiting is isolation. It's easy to withdraw, stop praying, and sink into discouragement. But that's when pressing in is most crucial. Worship, even when it's hard. Read the Bible, even when it feels dry. Pray, even when words feel empty. These are not just actions, they're lifelines. They shift focus from feelings to faith, from silence to certainty. God's presence is often clearest in hindsight. Looking back, people realize he was orchestrating every detail, even in moments of doubt. Psalm 40 speaks of being set on a firm rock, but that stability isn't always immediate. The process of going from a pit to solid ground requires trust. Those who wait with expectation will one day see how every moment, every delay, was preparing them for something greater. The greatest mistake is thinking God's silence means indifference. He is not ignoring prayers. He is answering in ways not yet visible. That's why trust is essential. The Bible is filled with stories of those who felt abandoned only to later see that God had been working all along. And once that realization hits, something powerful happens next. Suffering turns into praise. Something happens when suffering turns into praise. Psalm 40 describes this shift, a new song, a testimony of God's goodness. It's easy to praise when things are going well, but real faith is praising in the middle of uncertainty. That's not denial, that's power. The Bible teaches that praise isn't just a reaction, it's a weapon. It confuses the enemy, shifts the atmosphere, and opens doors that seemed permanently shut. Think about Paul and Silas in prison, chains on their wrists, no escape in sight, yet they sang. Not after the miracle, but before it. And what happened? An earthquake broke their chains. That's the pattern of the Bible. Praise unlocks breakthrough. Not because God needs validation, but because faith in action moves mountains. The spiritual realm responds when a believer chooses praise over panic. This kind of praise isn't surface level. It's rooted in trust. It's what Job did when he lost everything. It's what David did when he was pursued by enemies. And it's what every believer must do when life feels unfair. Angels stand ready when praise rises from a place of struggle. That's why the psalmist speaks of a new song, not just words, but a testimony of transformation. Praise also shifts perspective. When focused on problems, they seem overwhelming. But when focused on God, peace replaces fear. It's like looking at the night sky. At first, it's just darkness, but when adjusting the eyes, stars begin to appear. The same happens spiritually. Problems may not disappear instantly, but praise makes them smaller in the light of God's power. Some wait for joy to come before praising, but the Bible flips that. Praise first, and joy follows. It's like dancing before hearing the music. It doesn't make sense to the world, but it's a principle of faith. The psalmist experienced it firsthand. God turned his mourning into joy, his waiting into worship. Those who trust in this process will see the same transformation. True praise is a testimony. It doesn't just change the person, it changes those around them. When others see someone praising in hardship, they take notice. It's why so many are drawn to stories of miraculous turnarounds. The testimony of one fuels the faith of many. And once someone experiences the power of praise, they begin to understand something even deeper. Waiting on God is never wasted time. Waiting is never easy, but it's never wasted. Psalm 40 shows that God isn't just making us wait. He's working in us while we wait. Every delay has a purpose. Every season of stillness is shaping something unseen. The world teaches impatience, but the Bible teaches endurance. Those who rush ahead often miss what God was preparing, but those who trust the process gain something priceless, unshakable faith. Think of a seed planted in the soil. Nothing seems to be happening at first, but underground, roots are growing. If someone digs it up too soon, they ruin the process. Faith works the same way. Just because there's no visible change doesn't mean God isn't moving. The Bible is filled with people who had to wait. Abraham for a son, Joseph for freedom, David for the throne. None of them were forgotten, neither are you. Many mistake waiting for inaction, but Psalm 40 speaks of an active wait. It's not sitting idly by, it's preparing. Athletes train before a big game. Soldiers sharpen their skills before battle. Believers should do the same. Read the Bible, strengthen your prayers, align your heart with God's will. Because when the appointed time arrives, those who prepared will be ready to receive the blessing. The hardest part of waiting is not knowing when it will end. But God's timing is never random. He sees the full picture, things we can't yet understand. A child may want to drive a car at 10 years old, but a wise parent knows they're not ready. In the same way, God sometimes delays things for our protection, our growth, or because something even greater is coming. The challenge is trusting Him through it. When frustration comes, remember this: the Bible never says, wait alone. It says to wait on the Lord. That means relying on His strength, not just our own. It means staying connected in prayer, surrounding ourselves with faith-filled people, and remembering past victories. Those who have gone through the waiting process before us left behind testimonies that prove God always comes through. The waiting season isn't a punishment, it's preparation. If God answered every prayer instantly, faith wouldn't grow. But those who endure learn patience, wisdom, and resilience. And when the moment of breakthrough comes, they're not just grateful for the blessing, they're stronger because of the journey. Yet even in the waiting, there's something that gives strength, something that keeps faith alive. Waiting is hard, but praying gives strength to endure it. Psalm 40 reminds us that even when God seems silent, He is still listening. Prayer is not just a request, it's a connection. It transforms despair into faith, anxiety into trust. Those who pray during the wait don't just survive the process, they grow through it. The Bible is clear. Those who seek God in prayer will find the strength they need. Think of Jesus in Gethsemane. He knew the suffering ahead, yet He prayed. Not for the situation to disappear, but for the strength to face it. That's the key. Many pray for problems to be removed, but true faith prays for endurance. The Bible shows that when people pray with sincerity, heaven responds. Angels ministered to Jesus that night, just as they minister to those who cry out to God today. Prayer changes things, but first, it changes the person praying. It shifts focus from the problem to the provider. Someone overwhelmed by fear can step into prayer and walk out with confidence. Not because the problem is gone, but because they are no longer carrying it alone. Psalm 40 shows that David's strength came not from himself, but from his trust in God. That trust is built through prayer. Sometimes people stop praying because they don't see results immediately. But silence doesn't mean absence. When Daniel prayed, his answer was delayed by spiritual opposition. If he had stopped praying, he might have missed his breakthrough. The Bible teaches persistence. Keep praying, keep believing, keep trusting. The spiritual battle is often won by those who refuse to give up. Another key is praying with expectation. Not weak, doubtful prayers, but bold ones. Prayers that declare God's promises. The Bible says to come before God with confidence, knowing He hears and responds. When a child asks a loving parent for something, they don't beg, they trust. The same applies to prayer. Those who believe in God's goodness pray differently. They pray with faith, not fear, and prayer is never just for ourselves. Psalm 40's transformation from suffering to praise isn't just personal, it's a testimony for others. Prayers strengthen the individual, but they also impact those around them. A praying person changes the atmosphere of their home, their family, their workplace. When others see faith in action, they are drawn to it. And that's why prayer doesn't just prepare a person, it prepares them to be a witness. Every trial, every delay, every moment of uncertainty, it all has a purpose. Psalm 40 reveals that waiting on God isn't just about personal growth, it's about becoming a testimony for others. When someone sees a believer endure hardship with faith, it sparks something within them. The Bible shows that personal victories aren't meant to be kept private, they're meant to inspire, to lead others toward faith. Think of the countless stories in the Bible. Joseph went from a pit to a palace, but his testimony wasn't just about his own success. It was about God's faithfulness. Job lost everything but remained steadfast, and his story has given hope to millions. The same applies today. Someone's answered prayer isn't just for them, it's proof that God still moves. That's why sharing testimonies is so powerful. Faith is contagious. When people hear real stories of how God intervened, they start to believe it can happen for them too. Psalm 40 describes a transformation, a new song of praise after a season of suffering. That song isn't just for the person who sings it, it's for those who listen. Words carry weight. A simple story of God's goodness can change a life, renew faith, or even bring someone back to prayer. It's easy to focus on the struggle while waiting, but what if someone else's breakthrough depends on hearing your story? Many hesitate to share because they think their testimony isn't dramatic enough. But the Bible shows that every act of God, big or small, is a reason for praise. A prayer answered, a door opened, a storm endured. These are all reminders that God is present and active. And testimony isn't just about past victories, it's about future hope. If God has moved before, He will move again. That's the confidence Psalm 40 instills. When someone stands firm in faith, declaring that God is faithful, they are not just recalling the past, they are shaping their future. What is spoken in faith has power. Words align the heart with hope, shifting the atmosphere from doubt to expectation. This is why every believer has a role to play. The Bible calls people to be the light of the world, not hidden, but shining for others to see. Faith grows through community, through shared stories, through encouragement. Someone out there needs to hear that God still answers prayers. They need to be reminded that the wait is worth it, that the breakthrough is coming. And when it does, now that you've seen the power of Psalm 40, the question is, how will you apply it? Will you continue to see waiting as a burden, or will you embrace it as part of God's divine preparation? The truth is, faith isn't just about the destination, it's about the process. Every moment of patience, every unanswered prayer, every challenge, it's all shaping you into someone stronger, someone more rooted in trust. But here's something to think about. What if your current struggle is the very thing that will lead to your greatest testimony? What if, right now, God is preparing a breakthrough that will not only change your life, but also inspire others? The Bible is filled with stories of people who waited, endured, and then saw God's power in ways they never expected. Could that be your story too? Take a moment to reflect. How has waiting shaped your faith? Have you ever experienced a time when God's timing was better than your own? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this message has spoken to you, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to someone who needs encouragement. If you want to keep growing in faith, if you want to discover more about the power of God's Word, make sure to subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications. That way, you'll never miss another insight that could strengthen your spiritual journey. Remember, faith isn't just about believing, it's about living it. So, are you ready to take the next step?